Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to the Fantasy 420, where today we're going to be returning to the Diamond and discussing two players who are being drafted very closely in 2019 Major League Baseball fantasy drafts. We're going to call this segment a little this or that. These two players who we're going to be looking at in this video and probably for the rest of the week are being picked very closely in terms of round and also play the same position. So a lot of questions coming around on these players, and we're going to make a tough decision. Obviously, these are very good players. These two players we're going to be talked about today are being picked in the first round, and a decision has to be made. So we're going to be levying a decision, and without further ado, let's get started. We're going to be talking about two first-round outfielders today, those being Christian Yelich and Ronald Acuna. So we'll start off with a little bit of a Christian Yelich recap of 2018 season. He was age 26, and the Marlins had just traded Giancarlo Stanton to the Yankees after being sold to the Derek Jeter ownership group. Mr. Yelich didn't want to be a part of that rebuild or the superstar in the rebuild, so he requested a trade. The Marlins obliged and traded him in January to the Milwaukee Brewers. Milwaukee and Christian Yelich then made the playoffs. Yelich had a dream MVP season and lost in 7 games in the NLCS to the Dodgers. And he was arguably a fantasy MVP, winning tons of leagues for a lot of players. Nobody expected him to do that well, and he really proved himself as one of the best players in the league, obviously, with an MLB MVP season. So I just want to run down the stats for you very quickly. In 147 games, he had 118 runs. He hit 36 home runs, had 110 RBIs, stole 22 bases, and batted .326. So just destroyed in every single category, and it was just absolutely amazing. So moving on, we'll move on to Ronald Acuna's 2018 recap, which was obviously a lot different. He was turning age 20, consensus number 1 prospect for a year, maybe 2 in Major League Baseball. Everybody was waiting for him to be called up. The Braves waited a month and got that extra year of team control, which I'm not really a big fan of when teams do that, or the rule in the league. Anyway, he had a superb National League Rookie of the Year 2018. He even, with that month off of the slow start, landed on the DL once and still looked amazing, helped lead the Braves to the playoffs, and set many age-related records in terms of home runs for being 20, yada yada. I can't really go into all those. The video would take too long. But to recap his stats a little bit, in 111 games, he had 78 runs, 26 home runs, 64 RBIs, 16 stolen bases, and hit .293. So once again, very good all around. Didn't really hurt you too much, and that's for a rookie season at age 20. So Ronald Acuna, really, really good 2018. Once again, helped people win leagues, probably on a lesser level, at least helped them get into the playoffs. Before we levy the verdict, I think it's important to point out the positives and negatives that have happened since the end of the season and the start of this offseason. The first being, we'll start with Christian Yelich and the positives that happened around him. Obviously, it's another year in Milwaukee playing for that Brewers team, so there's going to be another year of comfortability. I firmly believe they're going to be a contender. I think that they signed Yasmani Grandal in the offseason is huge, and re-signing Mike Moustakas, they could possibly have the best hitting lineup in all the major leagues, and that's obviously very good for a fantasy hitter. Sorry about that. That's our cat cow jumping on the ledge there. But their lineup is going to be Kane, Yelich, Aguilar, Travis Shaw, Ryan Braun, Mustakis, Yasmani Grandal, and Orlando Arcia. That's a very, very good hitting lineup. Like I said, possibly the best in the majors. Obviously, it would end with a pitcher since they're in the National League. But wow, a lot of positivity being a hitter in that lineup. Nobody's going to be able to pitch around you, and you're a lot of opportunities to drive in a lot of runs. A lot of positive things also happened for Mr. Acuna. Obviously, another year in general for him, going to his second season, age 21. I also expect the Braves to be a contender. They added Josh Donaldson to provide another layer of protection, and they also might be moving him from leadoff to cleanup, which I really like. It would be less pressure for him to get on base, and it would give him more power stats and allow him to settle in a little bit more into, I think, his natural role into the major leagues. Their lineup would also be very good. Markakis and Incarnate kind of switching around in that leadoff spot, and then Josh Donaldson, Freeman, Acuna, Albies, another year out of him, the other outfielder out of Markakis and Incarnate, Dansby Swanson and McCann, the catcher, and then obviously finished by a pitcher. Very potent lineup. Once again, a lot of opportunities to drive in runs with Albies and more protecting him. I think Markakis and Incarnate are a duo who are usually kind of undervalued in fantasy baseball, so I think that would be a decent amount of protection, not as much as Yelich, but like I said, still a lot of opportunity to drive in runs. And also, they have a very good pitching staff. I really like the Gosman trade last year, and he'll be entering their staff this year. Taryn Newcomb, hopefully, he'll bounce back and see a little bit more of the start he had last year instead of the finish, and hopefully another year out of Fultonwitz. So I really like the Braves in general. I think they're going to be a contending team, and there's a lot to look forward to for them and Acuna. There are negatives, though, I believe, for both players, and those are obviously some of the most important when it comes to actually levying the verdict. So starting with Yelich, I believe with such an amazing season, it's hard not to see a little bit of regression. Even if that regression is small, it's still a regression in statistics, and I think that that's likely. I would be hard-pressed to see him with a back-to-back NL MVP season, and he won't even really need to. That Brewers offense, like I said, is going to be crazy. They're going to be putting up a lot of runs very consistently, so they're not really going to need him to do what he did last year. They also have a very questionable pitching staff. It could be good thing for the offense, meaning they'll have to overcome and score a lot of runs, but they are in a very tough division with St. Louis, the Cubs, and I think the Reds improved tremendously. People are predicting the Pirates to be around a 500 team, so that would be everybody being around 500 or above. And if that pitching staff blows too many games and they see maybe a little regression out of Yelich, I might not be so confident of the Brewers and Yelich's late season antics. He was really good at the end of last season, and obviously if the incentive isn't there, he might not be as good, and that is a very important time of the year. Obviously you need to get into the playoffs, so that regular season in baseball is very important, but the playoffs is also equally important. So that scares me a little bit. I'm not going to lie. Moving on to Acuna, that might be the hardest division in baseball. The Nationals pitching staff is crazy good. Phillies getting Real Muto and Harper. The Mets with Cano and signing Ramos from Tampa Bay in the offseason. You're also depending on Josh Donaldson, McCann, and Markakis, who are either oft injured or old, to stay healthy and contribute a lot to that team. So kind of iffy propositions on both of those ends. Kind of similar to Yelich. If they're not beasting with that division being so good at the end of the year, that does hurt a little bit. So I think a lot more would have to go right for the Braves to win that division than, say, the Brewers. and repeat in the playoffs in 2019. So that does scare me a little bit for Acuna late in the year. They might see what they can do this year and then plan more for 2020, 2021. So we'll see. But that being said, I obviously still like both of those players. So we're going to move on to our verdict here. I do have to pick one guy. I do believe they're both very worthy first round picks, and I don't think you're going to be wrong with either of them. But I am going to have to actually side with the young guy and choose Ronald Acuna. If it does happen, I just love that role change, like I said, from leadoff to cleanup. It should provide him with less pressure of getting on base and more seeing the pitches and driving in the runs. And I just watched him as an eye test last year, and his power, he looked amazing. And I think you're going to want to bet on him earlier rather than later. And this would be a great year, especially if you think he's a generational prospect of the Mike Trout, Mookie Betts sort of talk. Then you're going to want to buy into that guy now. You're going to want him this year as opposed to, oh, Ronald Acuna is in that stratosphere. Now I have to start picking him in the top, 3 picks. No, you get him this year, lock him into your lineup. Hopefully he stays healthy. That young Braves team is contending all year. And I just think that even if Yelich sees a little regression, we should consider that more of a normalization. I mean, his year last year was just so incredible that, like I said, even if the Brewers repeat that success, which I predict them to, I would predict them right now to win that division. It's going to be a dogfight between them and the Cardinals and the Cubs, maybe even the Reds if they really surprise. But I just think even if I predict the Brewers to win that division, I'd predict a slight decrease from Yelich, and maybe he has a downturn in terms of staying healthy. Acuna is just younger. He's ready to prove himself, ready to have a full year of being that Braves franchise player with Freddie Freeman and hopefully Ozzie Albies, and I just really love him going into next year. I would not hesitate at all buying into Ronald Acuna now, and I would just do it. Like I said, passes my eye test. I believe in him as a talent, and I would move forward with him and not look back. So thanks for listening today, guys. I really appreciate you tuning into the video. Tomorrow I'll probably have another this or that unless there's important late-breaking news I need to discuss in the realm of sports. But otherwise, guys, it's a pleasure as always, and I'll see you tomorrow. Take it easy.